I'm not using the word unorthodox in the religious sense. Rather, I'm simply referring to three counterintuitive things that God often does use to lead people to the person He wants them to marry. And I also wanted to briefly mention that the deadline to enroll in AGW University is quickly approaching. You're not going to find a magical formula in these courses that makes your future spouse suddenly appear. Rather, if you're looking for rich, biblical, deep information about relationships, then this may really benefit you. If you're a Christian single person who wants to be married, but you have past wounds you want to work through, you just lack the knowledge of knowing what you should do to most effectively interact and meet with the opposite sex, or you're interested in the one-on-one email coaching with me, you might want to click the link in the description of this video to learn more about this unique opportunity. I'm also giving away a $50 scholarship for everyone who enrolls before the deadline, which is November 21st at 11:59 p.m. Number one, God may lead you to the one when you stop trying to find the one. I've heard a lot of personal testimonies where someone really wanted to be married, but for whatever reason, it was just taking a lot longer than they wanted or expected. But then this person basically gave up hope, so to speak, about getting married. They just kind of said, it's not going to happen. I'm going to let this go. They stopped looking, and then their testimony is that they met someone and God led them to the one after they gave up hope. Now, please stick with me throughout this point because I'm not saying what many people may think I'm saying. A lot of people believe that the best way to find the one is to not look for the one. So they think if you just don't do anything, that's the best way for the sovereignty of God to work in your life. And I'm really not saying that. So stick with me here so I can explain this point fully. I believe that not looking is really an illogical method of finding. Not looking and finding are just counterintuitive things. So I really do believe that when you find the one God wants you to marry, there will be direct action on your part. That may not be right now. God may be saying, hey, wait, don't do anything right now. It's not the right time. But at some point, all relationships always have two people taking active steps as they interact with one another. It's not a relationship for someone to magically appear at your doorstep, pursue you, propose to you, do everything, and you just do nothing. That's not going to happen. But this brings us back to the question I started with. Why are there some people who have this testimony about finding the one when they stopped looking for the one? It's not because God needs us to play reverse psychology, as though the logic is, well, I want a spouse, therefore God isn't giving me a spouse. So if I tell God I don't want a spouse, God will then give me a spouse. That's not what's happening in this instance. Rather, what I believe is happening is that oftentimes our expectations on how we will meet the one are actually limiting us on meeting the one. In other words, when people stopped looking for the one, they stopped holding on to their very narrow expectations of how they would meet the one. And then they started living their life in different ways than they were when they were just looking for the one. And through living their life in different ways, God then introduced them to different people, and one of those people ended up being their spouse. But if that person would have just kept looking for their spouse in that one way they thought and imagined they would meet their spouse, that narrow lifestyle would actually be limiting them from meeting other people, because it's just impossible for us to know how God's going to introduce us to the one. And so again, those expectations of how it's going to happen end up being limiting beliefs on us. For example, this really is one of the ways I met my wife. I met my wife on a missions trip, and finding a spouse was really the last reason I went on that missions trip. That was the furthest thing from my mind. But when I went on that missions trip, I inadvertently did things that make a lot of sense of why you would meet someone there. I went somewhere where there was a lot of other Christian singles. Other like-minded people were doing things that I was doing. And through these natural ingredients, God brought Bethany into my life. But I would never have gone on that missions trip if I was just narrowly minded and thinking, I'm going to find my spouse in this one specific way. Because I wasn't doing that and living my life in a different way, God had opportunity to introduce me to different people. This same type of thing happened in the Bible at many points. For example, when Moses fled Egypt, he went to Midian, and there God introduced him to Zipporah. But if he would have just stayed in Egypt and kept doing the same things, he would never have left and found a new location and thus found his future wife. The same thing happened to Jacob when he fled from Esau. He went to a new location. His life completely changed, and he wasn't looking for a wife there, but that's when he was introduced to Rachel. So all that to say, perhaps when you let go of the expectations of how you thought you were going to meet the one, you will then be able to live your life in a different way, and God will use that different path to introduce you to the person he does want you to marry one day. Number 2, God may lead you to the one when you intensely look for the one like you never thought you would. The normal path for marriage for most Christian singles is that they're kind of in the middle of the road. They're open to a relationship, but they're not like actively, intensively looking for the one. But they're also not being so passive that if a good opportunity comes up, they just don't do anything. Most people are just living a normal Christian life, open to a relationship. They meet someone, they become friends, they get connected more and more. Eventually they start dating, things progress, and then they end up getting married. In point 1, we talked about one orthodox extreme to that normal path. We talked about the one extreme of not doing anything anymore and just kind of like giving up that hope and living your life differently and not looking. Now we need to talk about the other end of the spectrum that is a very good possibility God may use to lead you to the one. And that's taking the other opposite side of what we talked about of not looking to intensely looking very seriously in a focused way for a spouse. A lot of people do not imagine that that is the way God's going to lead them to the one, but it often is the path God ends up using for people when they finally give it a try. An example of this in Scripture is in Genesis 24, where Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for Isaac. He specifically sent him on a mission to find Rebekah, and God blessed that and brought Isaac and Rebekah together. As Proverbs 16:2-3 states, all a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. Motives are more important than methods. God's blessing is more important than traditional dating or online dating. The most important thing is that we are not limiting God by refusing to do something he is calling us to do. Online dating, for example, has become a very common method in which God leads two Christian singles to each other so that they can get married. Now, I know the term online dating can be very triggering to many people. I've learned this from past experiences when I've talked about it on this channel. And that's completely okay. I know many of you have had really bad experiences with online dating. And I'm in no way saying that online dating is perfect, that you can't run into terrible people online and it just be a disaster. And God may be saying, hey, that is just not for you. And that's completely okay. But I also want to say that we can be limiting God by saying no to something God is asking us to try. My main argument for people's hurt feelings towards online dating is that online dating really isn't the problem. Online dating is just a morally neutral tool that allows people to connect with each other. The people using online dating is the real issue. So I'm in no way diminishing that you may have had, or many of you may have had, bad experiences using online dating, but the method of online dating was not the problem. The problem was the people using it that you were interacting with. And what I would say is if you could just create some sort of simulated universe where you could somehow interact with just as many people face to face as you can with online dating, which is impossible, but let's just say you could do that. You can meet just as many people online and just as many people face to face. You would have just as many bad experiences because the same people are in the same area. The difference between online dating and traditional dating is that online dating exposes you to so many more people than is ever possible in the real world. And thus you're getting a snapshot of how devastatingly bad the human heart is en masse. And you're experiencing all kinds of issues because that's the majority of people in the world. We're all broken. So it's very difficult to find someone who's whole and ready to live biblically and love in a mature way. And you're experiencing that because you're seeing a lot of people online. But that same issue would be there if you could reach that volume through traditional dating. So online dating is really not better than traditional dating. I'm really not saying that. But it can be a good option for people who lack options. One core ingredient to meeting the one is actually meeting Christian singles. At least one Christian single. It is literally impossible to be in a relationship if you never meet someone, because a relationship requires two people and you can't do it by yourself. So if you're someone who lacks options, online dating may be an option. Online dating opens a whole can of worms that I know people are thinking about, and there's all kinds of rebuttals, and I'm not saying it's perfect. There's a lot more questions I could answer, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. This is such a hot topic issue, and so many of my AGW University students have asked me about online dating that I've actually created a whole course on this topic called the Effective Online Christian Dating Plan. This course isn't a part of the core curriculum at AGW University. It's really just a bonus course for people who are interested in learning more about this specific topic. So you don't have to take this course if you did enroll. But I give it away for free for everyone in AGW University, again, because I know so many people have asked me about it. And number 3, God may lead you to the one after you let go of the hope that someone is the one who really isn't. It's very normal for Christians at some point in their journey to believe they've met the one, but to later find out that they were actually wrong. One huge problem occurs, however, is when people are not willing to accept that they were wrong about their original belief that this person was the one. It's going to happen in our walk that we sometimes mishear God. That's normal, and it's a part of the learning process. We need to be humble and accept that. But you end up blocking God's blessings when you're unwilling to accept that you were wrong about your belief that you have already met the one. I have a lot of resources on this YouTube channel about how to know if someone is the one. So just go to the channel, you can scroll through it, and you'll see all kinds of resources on that topic. But big picture, and put most simply, the only true way to finally know if you've met the one is when you actually marry that person. You get into a relationship, it works out, and you actually get married. If enough time has gone by to accept that this relationship is never going to happen and you're never going to marry this person, then you have to accept that this person is not the one. But the sooner you're able to accept this, the sooner you are often introduced to the person God does really want you to marry one day. When we're clinging to that false hope, we can't be open to that true hope. So we have to let go of who we thought was the one if they're not the one. And then that is oftentimes the very key to actually meeting the person God does want you to marry. As Proverbs 19:21 states, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the Lord's purposes that will stand. If you feel like you would benefit from intense biblical training that will help you take biblical and practical steps to meet the person God may have for you, then I encourage you to explore AGW University by clicking the link in the description of this video. This really isn't a good fit for all of you, but for some of you, it's exactly what you need. I'm also offering a $50 scholarship for everyone who enrolls before the November 21st deadline. I'll see you over at AGW University.